Welcome to the Partyist channel. Today we explain Genesis chapter 5 in a clear and simple way, step by step. So, we're diving into a really fascinating piece of historical narrative today. If you've been following along with the story of Genesis, you know we literally just came out of the massive, momentous events in the Garden of Eden, which was, of course, followed by the tragic story of Cain and Abel. Now, the text takes a sudden, almost unexpected shift. We're presented with a genealogy. But this isn't just some dry, dusty list of names to skip over. This chapter actually serves as a absolutely crucial, living bridge that connects the original creation narrative to the impending, world-altering event of the Great Flood. It's a timeline, it's a historical record, and it's a profound theological statement all rolled into one. By really looking closely at this chapter, we're going to understand exactly how humanity progressed all the way from Adam down to Noah.
Here is our roadmap for today's learning. We're going step by step through every single verse, not skipping any parts to uncover the fascinating narrative hidden in these names. We have 6 parts. First, the generations of Adam. Second, the rhythm of mortality. Third, Enoch walks with God. Fourth, Methuselah's incredibly long life. Fifth, Lamech and baby Noah. And finally, practical lessons and legacy. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. The generations of Adam.
Okay, let's dive into this by getting some simple context for verses 1 and 2. Remember where we are. Humanity has been banished from the Garden of Eden. The ground has been cursed, it's producing thorns and thistles, and humanity now has to really toil just for its food. Cain has been exiled for the murder of Abel, but, life continues. Adam and Eve have had another son, Seth, and it's through Seth that the primary lineage of humanity is now going to be traced. Verse 1 opens up by stating, "This is the written account of Adam's line, which firmly roots us in a historical record." The text immediately reminds us of a core truth we learned back in chapter 1. Verses 1 and 2 state, "When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them." Now, this is the plain meaning, the pashhat. Human beings carry the unique stamp of the Creator, but verse 3 adds this incredibly profound continuation to the idea. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. The divine spark, that image of God originally given to Adam, is now officially being passed down to the very next generation. Seth is the continuation of that original blessed creation. After Seth was born, the text tells us in verses 4 and 5 that Adam lived another 800 years, having other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived 930 years, and then he died.
Moving right along to Part 2. The rhythm of mortality.
So once the text moves past Adam, it establishes a very deliberate, formulaic pattern. When you read this section, it honestly feels almost like a rhythmic drumbeat. And that's not an accident. Historical narratives in the biblical text use structure to convey meaning, and this repetitive pattern emphasizes the stark new reality of human mortality. Remember back in the Garden of Eden, the warning was clear. If they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they would surely die. Well, this genealogy is the documented historical proof of that consequence playing out, generation after generation. Every single patriarch in this section follows a strict 4-step framework. Let me break that down for you. Step 1, the text gives us the exact age of the father when his primary son is born. Step 2, it tells us how many remaining years the father lived after that son's birth, making sure to note that he had other sons and daughters. Step 3, it calculates and provides the total lifespan of that individual. And finally, Step 4, it concludes with the heavy, definitive phrase, "and he died." By organizing the lives of these ancient figures into this rigid framework, the text creates a steady, unbroken chain of time and lineage. Let's trace the lines step by step so we cover the full chapter thoroughly. Seth lived 105 years, had his son Enoch, and lived to a total of 912. Enoch had Kenan at 90, living a total of 905 years. Then Kenan had Mahalalel at 70, living to 910. Mahalalel had Jared at 65, living to 895. And Jared had Enoch at 162, reaching an incredible 962 years. We have literally just covered a massive expanse of human history right there.
Before we go any further, I want us to just pause for a second and really reflect on the stark, simple reality of that phrase. And then he died. It just keeps repeating at the end of every single generation on that list, like a drumbeat. Seth died. Enoch died. Canaan died. Mahalalel died. Jared died. Even though these men lived for hundreds and hundreds of years, vastly longer than our lifespans today, their lives still had a definitive end. This drumbeat absolutely confirms the consequences of humanity's earlier choices in the garden. From dust you are, and to dust you will return. No matter how long they lived, mortality was the inescapable ultimate reality for all of them.
Which brings us to part 3. Enoch walks with God.
Now, what's really interesting about this contrast is that in verses 21 through 24, that steady rhythm of mortality we just talked about is suddenly broken. Out of nowhere, the formula changes for a man named Enoch. Notice the sheer difference here. On one side, you have the standard fate of every patriarch we've read about so far, and then he died. But on the other side, look at Enoch's completely unique fate. Verse 24 says, Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him away. There is literally no mention of death. The phrase, and he died, is deliberately missing. God simply took him.
So, the text tells us Enoch lived 65 years and became the father of Methuselah. After that, he walked with God for 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. Now, we are keeping things simple here, focusing purely on the pashhat, the plain meaning of the text. Walking with God simply means living a highly righteous, faithful life in a close, obedient, and simple relationship with the Creator. We don't need any deep mystical, Kabbalistic, or symbolic interpretations to understand this. In a world that the text later tells us is becoming increasingly corrupt, Enoch chose a path of simple, profound righteousness. And because of this close walk, God took him away at the age of 365, which, comparatively speaking, was actually a very young age for the patriarchs of this era.
Moving right along in order, Part 4, Methuselah, the longest life.
While Enoch was known for his unique departure from Earth, his son Methuselah becomes famous for a completely different reason. He returns the narrative right back to the standard formula, but he takes the numbers to the absolute extreme. The text tells us in verse 25 that when Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. After that, he lived another 782 years, bringing his grand total to a staggering 969. Altogether, Methuselah lived 969 years, and then he died. This is the absolute longest recorded lifespan in the entire biblical text. It's a massive number. In a genealogy that heavily emphasizes long lives, Methuselah stands completely unmatched.
And this brilliantly illustrates something absolutely fascinating when you actually sit down and map out the math. Because these lifespans are so incredibly long, the generations overlap in amazing ways. Methuselah wasn't just some isolated figure in the distant past. He was born in the year 687 of this timeline. Adam didn't die until the year 930. That means Methuselah's incredibly long life actually overlapped with Adam's life for over 240 years. And because he lived to be 969, his life also overlapped for hundreds of years with his own grandson, Noah. Methuselah forms a literal, living bridge across history, a single man whose life touched both the very first human and the man who would eventually build the ark.
Proceeding to part 5, Lamech and baby Noah. We are now looking at Methuselah's son, Lamech. Verse 28 says, when Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son. But once again, just like with Enoch, the standard formula hits the brakes. Instead of just giving the son's name and moving on to the numbers, the text stops to give us a specific explanation, a real prophecy surrounding this highly anticipated birth. The son born to Lamech is named Noah. The name Noah, or Noach in Hebrew, is a huge departure from the pattern of the chapter. We haven't been given the meanings behind the names of any of Seth's other descendants, but right here, the text specifically defines it. The name is derived from the Hebrew root nehem, which means to comfort, to console, or to give rest. Lamech breaks the standard naming pattern because he is looking at his newborn son and uttering a desperate, specific prophecy about the broken state of the world.
And this is exactly what Lamech says in Genesis 5:29. He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed. This is an incredibly important connection for us to catch. Lamech is pointing directly back to the events of chapter 3. He is acknowledging the plain textual meaning of humanity's ongoing struggle for survival. The ground is literally cursed. Survival is a daily, painful toil of the hands. Thorns and thistles are their everyday reality. And Lamech looks down at baby Noah and hopes that this child will finally be the one to bring comfort and relief from the heavy burden of the Edenic curse. After saying this, verses 30 and 31 tell us Lamech lived 595 more years, having other sons and daughters. Altogether, Lamech lived 777 years, and then he died.
That brings us to the final verse of the chapter, verse 32. The timeline accelerates slightly here. It says after Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
We don't get the rest of Noah's lifespan right now, because his story's not over. In fact, it's just beginning. The chapter concludes by setting the stage with these three sons. The ancestral bridge from Adam is now fully complete. The narrative is poised, and the pieces are all in place for the massive, world-changing events that are about to follow in the very next chapters.
Finally, Part 6, Practical Lessons and Legacy.
We've thrown around a lot of names and some incredibly large numbers today, but what can we actually extract from this ancient list of names to improve ourselves today? The biblical text preserves these historical narratives not just as trivia, but as profound, simple lessons on God's character and on human nature. There are 4 key practical takeaways here. First, remember verse 1. Every single person carries the likeness of God. That divine spark wasn't just reserved for Adam, it was passed to Seth and down through all the generations. When we interact with others today, we absolutely must remember we're interacting with beings made in the Creator's image. Second, our time on earth is limited. Despite lifespans stretching to 900 years, the drumbeat remained, and then he died. We have to use the limited time we have wisely and purposefully. Third, walking with God changes our legacy. Enoch didn't live the longest, not by a long shot, but he lived the most righteously. By striving to walk in simple, obedient faith just like Enoch did, we elevate our lives beyond just existing and dying. And finally, we should strive to be like Noah, to bring comfort to a toiling world. We live in a world that is still struggling, still full of painful toil. We can choose to be a source of rest, consolation, and help to the people around us right now.
To quickly recap, we have crossed the bridge. We started with Adam, who was created in the image of God, and we walked step by step through the generations, through Seth, Enoch, who walked closely with God, Methuselah, who lived an astonishing 969 years, all the way down to Lamech and the birth of Noah. We've traced the unbroken line of history. But Lamech's prophecy hangs in the air. He hoped Noah would bring comfort from the cursed ground. But as we look ahead to chapter 6, we have to ask a pretty provocative question. Will Noah be the comfort humanity desperately needs, or is a massive storm coming? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.